Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's interactive program. My name is Bob Hannessy. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm thrilled to be hosting this exclusive event on behalf of the Genesis Circle. And special thanks to George Elbaum and Mark Bernstein, co-chairs of the ATS Plan Giving Committee, who is sponsoring today's program. For best viewing today, we suggest that you put your Zoom screen setting on speaker's view. Personally, my wife Denise and I have been members of Genesis Circle for 10 years or more, and have been one of the most fulfilling decisions we have made. Knowing that we're included the ATS and the Technion in our estate plans makes us proud to know that even when we're no longer here, we will be supporting the university in a deep and impactful way. As fellow members of the Genesis Circle, you have expressed your commitment to American Technion Society through a very special and important form of financial support. You have named ATS as the beneficiary of a planned gift. This support is vital to Technion's future, and we wholeheartedly thank you for your foresight. By including ATS in your estate plans today, you are supporting the next generation of engineering, medical, and scientific leaders who will invent the future. It is now my pleasure to introduce Judy Sager, ATS Executive Director of Planned Giving, to give you a little bit more insight into what the Genesis Circle is and what it can mean to you. Judy?
Thank you, Bob. And thank you for all who are joining us today. I'm thrilled that you're all here today. The Genesis Circle was created over 20 years ago as a way to thank and recognize those individuals who've remembered ATS in their estate plans or included us in their life income plans. The Genesis Circle provides an opportunity to join special programs such as the one today and to meet other like-minded Technion supporters who want to leave a legacy to Technion. Today we have an excellent program, but it doesn't end there. I'm happy to speak with any and all of you about the Genesis Circle and what it can mean for you in more detail. You'll receive a link to the recording of this program in a few days, which will include my contact information. Bob, the floor is yours once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. As you all know, the Technion's impact extends well beyond the borders of Israel into countries all around the globe, and its graduates are affecting changes on almost every continent. Today's conversation is a prime example of exactly that impact. Dr. Nir Barzilai, a graduate of Technion's Ruth and Bruce Rappaport Faculty of Medicine, has made his home here in the US, doing important work at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, where he is director of the Institute for Aging Research, the biggest center in the world to study the biology of aging. Nir is also the principal investigator of the Einstein Nathan Schock Center of Excellence in Basic Biology of Aging and the Paul F. Glenn Center for the Biology of Human Aging Research at Harvard Medical School. Several drugs have been developed based in part on the paradigm-changing studies Nir has conducted as part of the Longevity Genes Project that examine the families of centenarians who have provided genetic and biological insights on the protection against aging. In his spare time, he has recently published his book, Age Later, where he reveals the secrets of super ages around the world. Associate Professor Uri Lesmes heads both the Lab for Food Chemistry and Bioactives and the Food and Health Innovation Center in the Technion Faculty of Biotechnology and Food Engineering, from which he earned both his undergraduate and his doctoral degrees. The scope of his research is broadband, ranging from the availability and affordability of health and eco-friendly food choices, to personal nutrition, to the safety and long-term effect of food additives on the human body. Uri has helped cook up an eco-friendly food alternative using insects and algae, as well as dietary fibers, and antioxidants. His current research is focused on carrageenan, a common additive used to thicken, emulsify, and preserve a number of foods, including importantly, the ubiquitous nut milks and that are flooding the market. Although its usage is widespread and has been considered safe, Uri's research has shown evidence that long-term exposure to carrageenan can have harmful effects on intestinal health and adverse effects on protein digestion in populations that require specialized nutrition, such as infants and the elderly. Uri has received many honors and prizes, including the Technion Award for Excellence in Teaching for 7 consecutive years, I might add. The Irwin and Joan Jacobs Fellowship awarded by the Technion Graduate School, and the Russell Berry Scholarship for Excellence in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology. Today, we'll hear about what we can all do to age better and more gracefully, to slow the typical aging process, to allow us all to live a longer life with health and grace, and to significantly delay aging-related diseases such as Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. Let me divert from the script for a minute and add a personal note. When my wife and I became aware of the Genesis program, we became enthusiastic supporters at the very outset. My thinking was that this was a very easy way to become a supporter of the Technion. We have all been blessed to live at a time in a country that has provided many, many opportunities for success of the individual, and many of us have had the opportunity to become, if not economically secure, then even marginally wealthy. What better way to support the Technion than a bequeath in your will to the Technion? So it was one of the things that I wanted to also add is that in Los Angeles, at all of our public meetings, on the name tags that we give everyone, there is a ribbon denoting the Genesis Circle participation. And this is a way to highlight and to recognize those members of our group that have made a bequeath in their wills. I would humbly suggest that those other chapters of the Technion might consider a similar program. And Judy, we might even consider such ribbons at our national programs. Before I turn the program over to Nir, a few housekeeping items. Following the presentation, you will have time for an interactive question and answer period moderated by Judy. You're all muted now, but she will unmute you during the Q&A period. It is now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Nir Barzilai.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Corinne. And it's nice to see other faces I know. Mary Sherman, you look just wonderful. Nice seeing you. Really nice seeing you. Jerry Kleinman, hi. So let me start. So I'm a graduate of the Faculty of Medicine, and let me tell you 2 fun facts that also connect me to the faculty and to you guys. One, until the 6 Days War, and I see that some of you probably heard about the 6 Days War by whom I seeing there. There are only 2 medical schools in Israel. It was the Jerusalem one, the Hadassah one, and the Tel Aviv one. So the government subsidized about 150 doctors a year, which was not enough for a 4 million people country that was growing actually quite rapidly. What did the other people do? They went to Italy, mainly to Bologna, if they had parents that had enough money to send them there, and that's where the other graduate came. In 1967, during the war, all those Italian students came back to fight in the war, and David Ehrlich, who was the first dean of the medical school, and David Barzilai, who's my father, who was the second dean of the medical school, who actually did a sabbatical at Mary Sherman's lab at Cornell, pretty much pushed through a government approval for this faculty of medicine in the Technion in order to bring back the veterans, the Italian veterans of the Italian medical school. And that's how the faculty of medicine started. A second thing, and that's years later, when I started in the Technion, I went straight, not to the beautiful medical school that wasn't there then, but I was at the Technion, and my curriculum for the first 3 out of 6 years of the program was only basic science. It was chemistry and math and chemical physics and all that. And I cursed because for 3 years, we didn't do anything near patients. We have no idea where we're going to. And we were just doing all those hard stuff. And I didn't know then, I didn't realize that this was so good for me, because when I came to the United States, I could do basic science. I could actually go on and do basic science with an MD only. Everybody assumes I'm a PhD. I'm a biologist, I'm a neurobiologist, I'm a geneticist, never done a PhD. And I'm not the only graduate of the Technion that can say that. So it was a great education, save time. Okay, and before I'm sharing my slides with you, I want to look at your eyes and tell you the most important thing. And by the way, Judy, you can finish, you can stop me when it's time. I have like 5 slides to show. But the major issue that I want to tell you is that you know that there is a biology of aging, right? You know who's kind of old and who's young. What people don't yet realize, or many don't realize, that aging is flexible. Aging can be targeted, aging can be delayed, and there's a lot of advancement in the field, from the discovery, from the drugs, from biotechs that are coming all around it. But you have to know, this is coming. Aging is something that we can target, delay, and also some opportunities to reverse aging as well. And the situation now is clear to you, right? We're getting old and we're starting to accumulate disease after disease. And what you see here is a bunch of diseases, the death of those diseases according to age. And it's not surprising to you that every one of those diseases, their death increased with aging. What's important to note as a Technion graduate, this is a log scale, okay? So your chances of dying from heart disease goes from 5 to 5,000, okay? It's a 1,000-fold risk. You know, cholesterol is only a 3-fold risk for you getting a heart disease. There's no greater risk than aging. And it's so for cancer and for Alzheimer and for diabetes. Aging is their major risk for that. So when I looked at this figure at that time, I said, look, the only way we can do something about it is target the aging itself, the biology of aging itself. Because if we go now to the hospital with heart attack and we get a stent or a bypass, all we did was treating locally our heart. And what happened to those people? In 2 years, they get cancer or diabetes or Alzheimer's, because we never targeted the aging. So the aging is what's important to target, because the aging is what really drives the disease. So the question is, can we do something about it, or what do we know in order to start targeting that? And I'm showing you here a slide that depicts the 8 hallmarks of aging. And I'm not going to tell you what are the hallmarks of aging, you can read. But in order to be a hallmark of aging, you had to show that you change it and it results in extended health span and lifespan. in preclinical models, in animals. This is relevant, for example, to what we see with COVID, right? One of the hallmarks is decline in immune function. Another is inflammation, which what kills a lot of people a few days after they get the COVID. But the interesting thing with all those hallmarks, you don't have to treat all of them in order to have an impact. In fact, the lines here shows basically that you can treat one and get effects on the other. And that's what commonly happens. And I would say that we did a shortcut by looking at animals that are living much longer than their species. And with intervention, there are few things that I will summarize in 2 sentences. One is that healthy lifespan, okay, so it's health span, not only lifespan, has been extended in numerous animal models, but variety of methods. And second, that there are drugs in human use now that have a specific effect, or maybe the major effect is in targeting aging in humans. Metformin and rapamycin are examples for such drugs. Is it relevant what we learn in animals to humans? Well, the thing that happened with aging that doesn't happen to any other disease is that all animals are aging like us. The hair, the skin, the diseases, the bones. So aging is very conserved. But what I want to show you is the picture of those guys. They were born between 1910 and 1920 in New York City. And what's unique about them is they all lived to above 102. When she died at 102, she was the little sister. They were all shocked. Helen lived to 110. When I saw her first, when she was 100 years old, she was smoking. And I said, Helen, nobody told you, none of your physicians told you to stop smoking? And she said, you know, the 4 physicians that told me to stop smoking, they died. And the point here is that those guys have been protected against the effect of the environment, and they did a lot of wrong things, but they had genes that allowed them to have slow aging. So we have people like that, okay? We have people who get to age 100 and slow their aging, and part of my lab is looking at 750 people like that, and we're doing a longitudinal study on their offspring to see how their aging is slower. More in my book, Age Later, some of the stories and some of the discoveries. But really the major question is, are centenarians getting sick when everybody gets sick? And now they live long, but they live sick longer, or is their health span and lifespan goes together? And here is the answer. The people who don't have longevity are okay kind of until 60, and then they start getting sick, and at age 80, only 10% don't have any disease. While our 100 years old are healthy for much longer, and even after the age of 100, 30% of them almost don't have any disease. In fact, a lot of them just don't wake up one day. But that to show you, yeah, we as humans have the potential to live much longer and much healthier. And those are tied together because it's not only that they live healthier, they have what we call a compression of morbidity. They get sick for very short time at the end of their life. That's all. And when you calculate that, and when you see data from the CDC that also confirms that the medical cost in the last 2 years of life of somebody who dies at 100 is third of that, of those who die at their 60s or 70s. There is a longevity dividend that we must use. We cannot give it up because it's just going to be better for the person, better for the economy to do it like that. What am I doing during this period and before? Well, there are 2 secrets that I can tell you. One of them is related to nutrition, looking forward to Uri's talk. But what we've done, and by the way, I wrote here to remind me, exercise is the most important thing you can do, or just move all the time. When you take animals and half of them, you let them eat whatever they want, and half you give them 60% of that, all those animals will live longer. They're always like our positive control. When we want to see if drug is effective, we have a group that's caloric restricted. And you see here that everybody is alive in the beginning, and those that eat whatever they want eventually die. And those that are caloric restricted are living longer and really using all their potential lifespan. And that was taken as, you know what, you have to eat less for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But that's not what we did. What we did is we gave those hungry animals, we gave them the food in the morning, and they were hungry, and they ate all the food in the morning, and then they were fasting for 23 hours. So it's not simple caloric restriction, it's fasting. And in fact, when we give them to eat their food throughout the day, less food, they're thinner, but they don't live longer. So it's really the fasting that's important. And what I'm doing is, which many of us are doing, is a 16-hour fast. I count 16 hours from when I finish dinner, let's say 8 o'clock, and I don't have anything until 12 o'clock the next day. And this activates lots of mechanisms that are good for aging. It's easy to do for most people, not all people. And I can answer more about it later. The second thing, there are two drugs that extend lifespan in almost every animal in the world. And there's a proof that they extend health span in humans. And those drugs are rapamycin and metformin. And metformin is a drug that I'm taking. I have to tell you, I had COVID-19. My wife and I were both calorically intermittent fasters and on metformin. We had COVID in April, and we were sick for 2 days, but we continued to work, very mild disease, and we think that's why. So I want to just finish with this slide, which shows you death around the world: China, Italy, United States, EU. I'm just showing you the data, but the point is best shown here in China. When you're over the age of 80, your chances of dying are 200 times more than when you're in your 20s. This virus that has no eyes knew exactly who's old, and unfortunately, we didn't protect those people on time, and we could have. For example, people on metformin had less hospitalization and less death. We could have thought about it before. We have to think about it for the immunization too. So let me stop here and move on, and I'll be happy to answer more. But just remember the point: aging is flexible. Aging can be targeted. We can do much better than we do here, and it's important for the society. Uri, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Nir. And this brings me to my own talk. And as you can see in front of you, it's a pleasure to be able to join you to discuss something that is hardwired into our emotions, and that is food. If you think about food, is one of the elemental things, elements of life. When we go out for a date, when we get up breakfast, like Neil was mentioning, and all along the healthy lifespan. And this is something that has actually fascinated me since I was a child. And I'll start with a small story of how I got to the Technion. I'm actually a native Colombian, I was born in a very small village called Vista Hermosa. I grew up in Bogota, in the Jewish community, which is one of the largest in Colombia. My grandfather and grandmother are actually Holocaust survivors. We escaped the Holocaust on a ship from Leipzig and reached Colombia, where they actually built a business and actually sent all the family to Israel. That's how I got here with my parents to Nazareth Elite in the north, and started after military service, started my Technion career with food engineering and biotechnology in mind, trying to really affect people through everyday habits. And food is one of the biggest bunch of chemicals that we ingest voluntarily on a daily basis without really any good prescription or any good guidelines, just a good hunch and perhaps somebody else to guide us. So I did a few stays abroad in Cambridge, in Reading in the UK, and before joining the Technion, I held a position in the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. But what brings me most passionately to this forum is actually this image over here. This is my late grandmother holding my firstborn son. She passed away 2 years ago. And in her last 2 years, just like Neil mentioned, she developed a lot of problems, health issues, that actually brought her to her end. And one of them was big troubles eating. And that, as a food professional and a food enthusiast, brought me to the realization that perhaps we're not cooking up good enough ideas to tackle the aging world from the perspective of food. And this is basically what I'm trying as part of my work in the Technion, trying to explore in the recent 3 or 4 years. The idea behind our research is trying to engineer personalized foods. Foods that are better tailored to what we need, to what we like, and what we are willing to accept. Because as Bob was mentioning, one of our projects that I will discuss in a few minutes involves scouring different, let's call it food sources like insects. And for Westerners, it can be sometimes hard to digest. But from the professional perspective, we're trying to understand how cooking and how processing of industrial food actually affects food properties and how those are actually translated to health effects. And that has to be judged from the perspective of the different stages of life, because when we were children or even infants, we had very specific needs and desires, and these change throughout the course of life. And we don't necessarily meet those needs in the current food sector. What is the underlying realization behind this? And that is that food processing helped us unleash the human potential. If we look at the evolution of primates over billions of years, the size of the human brain or the primate brain did not change significantly until about 170,000 years ago, where you see a great leap here, a great leap in the size or the volume of the brain compared to the size of the primate body. In fact, today, our brain is about 2% of our body mass, but it consumes about a quarter of the calories that we intake, meaning that it is very metabolically expensive. And how did we reach this point? Fire. The discovery of fire was actually one of the oldest hallmarks of discovery of fire is actually not far away from my home in caverns where Stone Age people left their markings with charcoals. And thermal processing helped us unleash the human potential, or helped us harness nature to unleash the human potential. Because thermal processing increased food safety. Fire kills bacteria, fire helps transform undigestible materials into more digestible materials. So we increase their bioaccessibility, the accessibility of calories. And when a living creature has enough energy to survive, he can divert the excess energy to other things. And if you think about the evolution of the food sector in the last 200 years, you will see that it actually accompanies the great leap in the human technology and the modern lifestyle that we know and we live on a daily basis. Because people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs didn't have to worry about where they will get their next meal. They didn't have to worry about hunting down a mammoth. So these things are actually facilitated by the basic concept of thermal processing that has now evolved into a completely vivid food sector that actually takes up only 7% of the human population. And about 200 or 300 years ago, about 40 to 50% of the human population globally had to deal with the food supply chain, meaning that we have released about 30 to 40% of the human population to do other things. And this is an important notion in the evolution of the modern lifestyle. So what am I here to talk about? About the fact that when we age, we need to understand that we are not the same as we were before. We change over time. We are dynamic creatures. And we need to understand that we need to meet nutritional needs to ensure our healthy aging, because you are what you eat. This is a well-known fact. Even Maimonides said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, because once again, the impact of food on health is immense. And in respect to healthy aging, I have here the 6 tips that I can hand off in this talk. One is to tone down on the intake of calories, but not too much, because at an older age, a lot of people actually lose their appetite, and this is something that has been extensively studied. And that is something that I will not touch today. I actually touched the second point, and that is protein, because the dwindling muscle mass of the human body actually needs a good answer from the food that we eat. And this is something that we've been trying to investigate and actually affect. We're talking about slowly digestible carbohydrates and dietary fibers, which in most of the Western world, we underconsume by far, almost by 1 order of magnitude below what is really recommended. So, for example, dietary fibers for a healthy adult should be about 30 grams per day. And right now, in a lot of different countries, we're consuming somewhere between 2 to 5 grams per day. We're talking about deficiencies in minerals and vitamins like vitamin D and various minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, and iron. And the use of antioxidants, which actually can stimulate a lot of beneficial activities in our bodily functions and in specific target cells. So from my own research, I would like to share with you one short story, and that is how we've been trying to take something from the stage of understanding to a real application. And this actually revolves around the world of protein and ensuring the delivery of good protein to seniors. The aging gut loses its ability to extract nutrients from foods. And therefore, a lot of focus has been done about trying to understand the digestive fate of proteins, like in these experiments that we've been doing in our lab. We use these bioreactors here at the bottom. You can see here, these nice, cool toys are actually mimicking a human gut. So we can sample them and, for example, see how alpha-lactalbumin and beta-lactoglobulin, which are whey proteins, which are commonly provided to fit people or just to aging people because they are considered to be of high nutritional quality, According to the common advice right now, alpha-lactalbumin is a readily digestible, or what we call a fast digesting protein that is recommended to be eaten by people who have slowly digesting or reduced capabilities of digestion, while beta-lactoglobulin is actually very, very durable. And our studies have actually shown that this information that has been collected in healthy adults, which are somewhere around 20 to 40, are not good predictors of the aging gut performance. Because when we actually go to an elderly gut, we see that a good and fast digesting protein suddenly becomes a very slow digesting protein, while something that we thought was a very bad option actually becomes a really good option. So it is completely counterintuitive because of the complexity of the gut and the fact that it is also dynamic. The fact that we eat and that we defecate every so often actually dictates a kinetic factor for the ability of the gut to extract nutrients from our foods. And we want people to age, as in these pictures, gracefully, with good health, not just to reach old age. And that's why we've been trying to find really good ways of providing protein that is bioaccessible and that is also tasty, because we want to live and we want to enjoy life. And who doesn't like ice cream? So one of the students in my lab actually had a really crazy idea. Let's find a really cheap and a really sustainable source for protein, edible protein, and that's insects, because growing a cow or a chicken or even fish to deliver protein to humans takes much longer time, takes up much more feed, and pollutes the world much more than insects. So we owe it to ourselves to explore this avenue. And in her project, in one of the final stages, we actually developed an ice cream that is enriched with protein that has been actually collected from silkworms. And this was introduced into something that looks like a vanilla with cookies sort of ice cream, although there are no cookies in there. It's just milled worms. And this protein added ice cream is not just tasty, but is actually protein fortified. And if you think about old age, sometimes you also start to develop mastication problems, dysphagia, a lot of issues around actually chewing food. So we were able to try to circumvent, if you'd like, this challenge of aging by providing a really comforting food like ice cream with very high protein, very high quality protein added to it without compromising the taste, the texture, the sweetness, the creaminess, smoothiness of the ice cream, not to a greater extent where people actually reject the ice cream. And this actually was this is also a very big pride for me to share with you that this was a project that was actually launched from the crazy idea that I had about eating insects about almost 5 years ago during one of the visits by Technion supporters, and that actually turned into a donation by the Laura Goering-Flug and then Daniel Flug-Capellino fund to actually support this research that is now reaching its final stages, as you see in real products that we hope will be in 1 or 2, 3 years on the shelves for people to consume, whether it is from actual silk moths or other protein origins like algae. One of our students has done similar avenues of thinking outside the box, for example, with falafel, trying to put algae into falafel. So there's a lot of thinking outside the box that can be done to ensure that we deliver people good options to maintain their health and sometimes even support healthy aging. And to finish up, I would like to leave you off with food for thought, or some thoughts on food. And I think that I close the circle on Nir's suggestion, and that is that this is a complex world of choices. But even when you think about proteins and all of the additives that you probably are hearing all over the place that are related to healthy aging, good bowel movement, etc., they do not significantly affect the health, the status of older adults unless they are coupled with exercise, preferably some resistance exercise. And this is a systematic review that actually claims this exact point that was published not so long ago, only 4 years ago. And this is also a good time for me to release the screen and hand over the floor or the screen back to Bob. Right? Oh, sorry, to Judy.
Thank you. So thank you, Anir, and thank you, Uri. I hope we've all taken great notes from what you shared with us today. Thank you for your wonderful advice. We'll now move on to questions, which you can either submit using the chat button or simply raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Bob.
Can I make, until you find a question, can I
Judy,
make?
Bob Hannessy has a question.
Yes. Nir, do you want to make a comment before we go to
I'm advisor to PepsiCo, okay? PepsiCo about how to prepare for, you know, the aging nutrition. And they said, think out of the box. So I said, you know, you need to do two things. One is to get Guinness beer, buy Guinness beer as a platform, because you can, it's rich, you can enrich it, and people are happy when they drink it. The second is buy Haagen-Dazs ice cream. They said, why? I said, because of protein problems. So I didn't know that the Technion already, Uri, that you invented that, but that's the advice for PepsiCo. You should talk with them. All right?
I hope they listened. Perhaps perhaps you can now throw them the idea again.
Hey, they took the hummus, you know, they are doing Sabra hummus, you know.
Yeah.
Bob?
Sometimes Israelis have crazy ideas.
Am I unmuted, Judy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to ask this leadoff question. Within the last 3 or 4 weeks here in the US, we have seen stories of the people of Okinawa and how long and healthy, what long and healthy lives they lead. They attribute it to a number of factors, diet, of course, but also to social interaction and staying active. And they typically live into their 90s and well into their hundreds, a huge percentage of them. Would either of you or both of you comment on the lifestyle of the Okinawans and what they're doing right and how we can emulate it?
Well,
You could start, Uri.
thanks. The Okinawans are just one example of a lot of centenarian studies, also in Sicily, Corsica, and by the way, even Israel is part of a few studies that actually say exactly that, and that is that the social activity and social circles of people are detrimental to their good health. And by the way, one of the best places that studies have shown to age is the kibbutz. Personally, I have families in the kibbutz. I know one of my close relatives passed away at the age of 93, and that is during his shift working in the kibbutz factory. He was still working physically in the kibbutz, and in that sense, the social context, family, support by others, social interactions, not retiring if you'd like. There's no other, even in Okinawa, by the way, their philosophy of life is to accept and to embrace, etc. So I think Nir can even detail more about that.
Yes, so 2 points. First of all, it's known as the blue zone, right? That's kind of where you can find all the things that will make you live older and better. And I've no doubt that they are all valid. There's just one point, and that's the centenarian. In order to be a centenarian, you have to have a genetics for that, okay? It's not because of lifestyle. People can change their lifestyle. They'll get over the age of 80, when half of us die, but they're not going to be 100 years old unless they have genes. Even if those areas, and I can talk about Okinawa after, but for instance, in Sicily, there are 3 villages where there are lots of men centenarians, but there are other villages in Sicily with the same kind of social environment and stuff, and they don't get to be 100. That's because there's genetic cluster. In Okinawa, the genetic cluster happened because in World War II, this population was decimated, and whoever survived had already genes that slow aging. I have many Holocaust survivors in my, by the way, my 750 centenarians are all Jewish, okay, for a reason we did it, for a genetic reason. So centenarian, you have to have something special, not the, and we have 2 drugs based on our discovering centenarians. Otherwise, absolutely right. All the other things are as important.
So I think our next question is from Judy Robinson. Do you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful program. I receive a lot of information from Technion on a regular basis, and I wish I had a little more. I remember this in better detail, but lately I saw something about a study where older adults were put into oxygen chambers and given oxygen for, I think it was 30 minutes at a time. And this had the effect of, on a cellular level, changing something, extending something, a chromosome, I believe, that actually seemed to produce results, putting some other measurements back to in these individuals 25 years.
Well,
I understood it, yes.
so
Your comment.
I'm advisor of this group. It's a group
Okay.
out of not Shaarei Tzedek, I'm sorry, Asaf HaRofeh Hospital, supported by a billionaire that's very interested in aging, Sami Segol. And their hypothesis is that oxygen doesn't get very well to many areas as we age. And if you take people and pressurize them in a chamber of oxygen, you can get this oxygen and rejuvenate them, okay?
Yeah.
The data that is rejuvenate was totally overblown, okay? They looked at what's called telomere length that doesn't have any really good application. And in fact, you don't want to do something to elongate the telomeres because you get a risk for cancer if they're too long. But they showed several really impressive improvement. But I want to tell you one thing, you know, studies have to be, a clinical study has to be controlled, okay? You just read something and say, oh, they've done that, so it's good. You have to see who's the control group, okay? And this study is not controlled. And it's important here because you take people for 3 months, you bring them twice a week, and you put them in the submarine, okay? And they're becoming friends and they're going together and they're coming and going. They're going to improve even if you don't change the oxygen, okay? So you have to be careful, but it's fascinating that they have some biological indices that changes, and it's contradictory to a lot of what we think, right? We think there's oxygen damage. I mean, Uri suggested something like that. And yet you put them in 100% oxygen and they're improving. So it's a complex biology, and we should see how it goes. Don't go to those submarines yet.
All right, I understand. So it's not necessarily too good to be true, but you're very skeptical. You've got a healthy degree of skepticism.
Well, the people that go there, and I know some of them are really happy with the results, but it's not a controlled, it's not an approved study. So wait
and see. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, we have two more questions. Jakob Ever, I think your hand was up. Oh, okay, so our next question is from Ernie and June Freeman.
You're muted.
Do you want to unmute so we can hear you?
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Terrific.
Uh,
Hi.
First question is, we use powdered dry egg white as a protein supplement. I want to know what you think about using that as a protein supplement. And the second question is, you mentioned these two drugs, rapamycin and metformin. Are these available? What does the dosages are correct? And can we use them, or are they still experimental?
You're a druggie. He
Holy-
knows that he doesn't.
Well, about the eggs are actually a very good option. They're a whole, what we call a whole protein. So they're very good for you. I'm not sure how well they taste because usually these powders are actually flavored. I know that the whey protein industry provides a lot more diverse options because it's well established from the other side of life, the infant formula. So you have many more options there. One thing to actually bear in mind when you see these things is the concept of hydrolysates. Hydrolysates are actually proteins that have been pre-broken down. So one of the adverse effects or the irreversible effects of aging is that the gut functions deteriorate. And therefore, our ability to digest protein is reduced. We can help this by two means. One is to get digestive aids, like pills of digestive enzymes, or we can get pre-digested food or semi-digested food, and that can come in the form of the commercial form would probably be called some sort of a broken down hydrolysate form. So hydrolyzed is the key word in that sense, and that should probably perform much better. But eggs as a whole, if you're not allergic, perfect.
The dried
And
eggs
if you-
we get are not flavored. We get them from a supplier that's not flavored. I just add a scoop to my oatmeal in the morning. And,
Yeah, then if you add some maple, and then that's even better.
Okay, Denise, I see your hand up.
what about the drugs? I asked about the drugs.
Oh, sorry.
The drugs are not, one drug, the metformin, I'm leading this study for the FDA to show that aging can be targeted. Both drugs need prescription. If you have a pre-diabetes or a diabetic, you can get it. Otherwise, you have to beg your doctor.
Ah, okay.
Thank you. Denise?
You're mute.
How do we get it? We have to have a doctor.
You have to go through your
Okay, we hear you.
prescription.
Up. You want to unmute?
Oh my,
I did.
Okay.
can you hear
Go
me
ahead.
now?
Yes, we can.
All right, two of the concepts that were discussed today were that of genes and that of fasting. And I think that it has been known for a long time that genes and fasting were important for health. I don't know if which is part of aging. So this is a terrific time for someone to do research on genes, and whether it's the gene sequence or the ability of genes to repair or produce the proteins that are needed. What is it about genes that has such an effect on how we age? And the concept of fasting, cultures all over the world have fasted for a long, long time. Where they ever got the idea of that, who knows? But does anybody know what it is about fasting that seems to be productive? And how about the timing of fasting? Fasting usually is not done on a daily basis necessarily. It could be done on a monthly or a weekly or whatever basis. It doesn't seem to have to be done on a daily basis. The cultures that do it all different kinds of ways. But does anyone know what it is about fasting that is helpful?
So first of all, the genes, I didn't mention that, but all my research is genetics. We're finding what we call longevity genes, okay? Those are changes in the genome that are associated with longevity. And we found clusters of those. A small example, 60% of our centenarians have something that makes their growth hormone ineffective. Okay, the growth hormone is a big system, so I'm just using it loosely. Growth hormones, ineffective. In a way, if you think about it, you have a certain time to stop putting the energy in growth and start putting the energy in repair. Okay, so that's really what's going. So we have our drug development, our finding are depending on genetics, on whole genome sequencing, whole exome sequencing, you know, lots of things like that. So yes, that's very important, and that's what we're there to discover. The fasting, maybe I'll give Uri, but from the fasting, for the intermittent fasting, certainly human evolution, you know, when the hunters got up in the morning, they started chasing the deer and got it in the evening and barbecued on the fire that Uri, okay, that's what they were. Breakfast is an invention of Kellogg's, okay? And convincing the mothers to say that's the most important thing in the world. But fasting has been known to be very important for health. Maimonides did that. And the form of fasting, I'm telling you what I'm doing every day, but there are people who are fasting 5 days, 3 times a year or 4 times a year. There's lots of take on this fasting.
Even all the religious, like the Muslim fasting methods,
Ramadan.
even Yom Kippur for the Jews, they all have studies that have shown that fasting is not a bad idea. Apparently, we humans don't need to eat 24/7. This is something that modern life has made too easy for us. And that's something that we should always bear in mind. As Nir was saying, about 40,000 years ago, we got up when the sun came out and we went to sleep around sundown. And now, you know, right now here in Israel, it's 10 p.m. And here I am talking to you guys like it's the middle of the day. So modern life brought good things and challenges.
So
And yet modern life brought greater longevity also.
yes. In the essence of time, I'm going to ask the next question, which is, does intense exercise improve over mild exercise?
Well, I'll start taking that one. I tried to answer some of it in the chat, but just to give a heads up, in the older adult fraction of the population, intense exercise is more related actually to injuries than mild exercise. So it's mostly about some exercise, and out of all the exercise, you have aerobic exercise, which is things like cycling, swimming, and things like that, versus resistance exercise, which is weightlifting, TRX, and other things like that. So resistance exercise at old age is actually preferred. So it's shorter time, and it should always be, you know, done with great care, like anything else in life. And it's actually shown better outcomes than intense aerobics.
I agree with Uri. I would just take this paradigm of caloric restriction, right? On caloric restriction, you know one thing. If you give the animal zero food, they'll die soon. They don't live longer, right? So the question is, you know that there's too much and too little. How much we have to figure out, but you have to be reasonable.
Thank you. And our last question is from Mark Bernstein. Mark?
Mark, you're muted. Maybe Mark had to leave.
No, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry, I had to get off for a second. Quick question for Uri, I guess mostly. There's all these sort of, you know, social media is finding people that like healthy food and stuff, and I'm one of those. So there's these new cereals and breads and all these things coming out that are designed to be supposedly to be healthy foods. Example one I can think of a name because I ordered it. It's called Magic Spoon, and it's like the cereals you grew up with. It tastes like it, but it has no sugar, high protein, high fiber. You know, it uses like vegan protein and things like that. Do you know if there's any research behind these things, or are these more like big just marketing?
No, actually there is. Actually,
Is
there is. More and more studies show that from the nutritional perspective, we have the three major macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, protein, and fats or lipids. So out of the three, the most pronounced effect on health of primates, and we are part of them, that is protein. So even mild changes in the protein fraction of our diet has the most pronounced effect on health. That's why you probably see the boom in protein added products all over the world. But this should also be taken with great care, because most people are actually getting enough protein in their diet today, especially in the Western world. And that's actually a commercial trend, if you'd like, that's tapping into real good research, but with no real outcome for most people, at least not, you know, in the US, the UK, and other Western countries, where getting 60 grams of protein daily is not that hard to get.
And then I've heard people say you should have, if you're working out a lot, you should get like 120 grams of protein or 150. And you're
Wow,
crazy numbers.
that's a lot. That's a lot.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yes, normally the normal issuance of or the recommended levels of protein is about 1 gram per kilogram body weight per day. Usually for a non-exercising individual, that would be 0.8, which for a 80 kilogram weighing person is roughly 60 to 70 grams of protein a daily. If you're highly active and you're not an Olympic athlete, you can go up to 1.5, 1.6. If you cross the 2 grams per kilogram body weight per day, you're starting to risk different adverse effects from overconsumption of protein. And the most pronounced one would probably be running to the toilet very often, which is not something fun.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. So I want to give a big thank you to Nir and Uri for a fascinating and informative program. And a special thanks to Bob for not only joining us today, but for his long-term dedication to the ATS and to Technion. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you who've joined us for this first special Genesis Circle program, and for your commitment to ATS and to Technion. Your backbone, your support is the backbone of ATS's Plan Giving program, and we are very grateful. Again, I want to say that we've recorded this program and you will receive a link in a few days. Have a great day, everyone. Be safe, exercise and eat right, and be careful about
Enjoy life.
and enjoy life. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.